All right. Are you ready? Because we'll do the intro. Is that all right? Okay. Okay. Right then. All right then. So here we go. Right. You ready to go? All right. It's hello from me, Anna, and Teddy. Are you, Teddy has already been busy talking. He didn't feel like he wanted to repeat himself. So welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna and Teddy, and our lovely guest today, who is Grisha Stewart. Hi, Grisha.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me on.
You are here because I am very interested in your book, and it's called Behavior Adjustment Training, New Practical Techniques for Fear, Frustration, and Aggression. So that really grabbed me when I saw that title. And I guess it would be good to start with what is behavior adjustment training?
So, behavior adjustment training, or BAT, is a technique that helps dogs get confidence and social skills. And in particular, what it does is it creates awareness of space and time, essentially, in the handler, so that they can manage that more effectively for the dog. And with that, then the dog can learn to gain confidence and navigate even sticky situations down the road. But at first, we really create this bubble of safety, essentially, and where they have time to decide what to do. And then basically their brain chooses the more peaceful path as time goes on. So it's really fun because it's soothing for the caregivers, and it's soothing for the dogs as well. And it's for you, puppy socialization is great for.
Your title has so much in it. The just techniques for fear, frustration, and aggression. All of them are obviously indicating a strong reaction from the dog, which sometimes makes people very uncomfortable. In fact, I had a situation just this week where Teddy and I were getting out of the car, and there was a lady walking past with two chihuahuas. And the reaction of one of the chihuahuas upon seeing Teddy, a bigger dog, was to stand stock still and bark, very aggressively. And the woman's reaction was to pull it and to say, come on, and kind of to tell it off. And I said, don't, it's okay. She's just afraid. Teddy's a bigger. The minute I said that to her, her reaction to the dog just changed completely. She calmed right down.
Right.
It was clear that she was just mortified that her dog was misbehaving in her eyes. And the minute I reassured her, and I wasn't being judgmental of her dog, then she just gave the dog time and wasn't pulling it anymore. And it really was, I thought, a very telling experience about the way that we react out of fear of being judged.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of sort of performative corrections where essentially the person is mortified that their dog is aggressing or barking or, not fitting the social norm. And so then people do something to their dog to show, don't worry, I know this is not okay, versus saying, actually, there's a being here who's terrified, and how can we help reassure them, right? And a lot of the work I do is really, it's community. It's teaching dogs to be in community with people, and it's teaching people to be in community with dogs, and learning to read each other's language, be safe, create that sense of safety, and so that social skills can emerge. And there's a 3.0 version. So the 2.0 book is still totally valid, but I'm right in the middle of writing the 3.0 book. And I've taught some webinars about it as well. And it's essentially adding on to that, this extra piece of relationship, of really paying attention to making sure we have a securely attached relationship, in the sense that we're safe havens, so the dogs can come back to us for safety. We're secure bases for exploration, so they can go and explore, right, rather than like staring at us the whole time as they walk along. and that they like to be around us. So kind of those three pieces, and some other things, some new leash skills. But
I liked what you said there about being in community. So, but I want to make sure that I understand exactly what you mean by that. So I'm just going to ask you to expand on that.
Mm-hmm. So I live in Oregon. We're big on community here, in coastal Oregon especially, but basically the idea of community, right, is that everyone belongs that's in the community. So the sort of the best version of community, everyone belongs, and the community is there to meet the needs of the individuals, and the individuals are also there to make sure that the community can meet its needs, like all of the community as a whole and the individuals in it. So healthy behavior is is something that, you know, works for the individual, and for that you know, thing that they're trying to do, and it also then doesn't get in the way of any of their other needs or the needs of anybody else in the community. And so between the dogs and the people, making sure that we look at, you know, why is this behavior happening? Not just, oh God, this is happening, let's stop it. But what is this, you know, a sign of? What is the dog communicating to us with this behavior?
So it's about helping the dog to fit in by addressing the dog's needs.
Correct. Right. So even and fit in, I'd go stronger to say belong, right? Because they're fitting in is like it's our system and the dog gets to sort of play in it. But actually what I'm looking for is this sort of co-creation of community, right? That the dog gets to say, hey, this doesn't work for me. Can we figure out, you know, something else? And of course, you know, we're humans, we have the thumbs and a little bit, you know, faster brains, in the sense that we need more things, we think. And so a lot of the dog schedule, of course, is driven by us. And anytime that we can not sort of take that stance of the, you know, it's our house and they get to live in it, it works a lot better. So yeah, so co-creation of this community together, that their voice matters just as much as ours does.
Yes, indeed. And I think
Teddy's like, yes, that's right.
Teddy's voice is heard loud and clear in every way. In our house, something that we are always very conscious of is wanting to make sure that he has a say in things. His how he has a say in things is he either likes it or he doesn't. It's that simple, isn't it? We understand what he likes and we make sure he has plenty of that, and we understand what he doesn't like. And for the most part, we try to keep that to a minimum. And that's how we address him having his say, because he's not going to tell us, you know, that doesn't really work for me.
Right. He's not going to use words. He's not going to, you know, put the thought in your mind, although who knows? Right. And yeah. And the thing is, that's like dogs have, you know, the out loud voice that people are more aware of, right? The barking. And like you're saying, there's so much more to it than that. And in fact, because barking is annoying to most of us, if we look for like smaller signals, then we don't need to have the barking. So that's the beauty. You know, that may still show up from time to time when they're extra alerted or whatever else, but it's you know, really looking for those smaller micro signals rather than waiting for them to shout. So
very simple things like people assume dogs will eat anything, don't they?
Right.
It's very clear that that is not true. If I offer something to Teddy and he decides to taste it, if he doesn't like it, it's not going to stay in his mouth. He spits it right out. Something that I discovered when I made him, in the summer, I made him some ice lollipops with, he does like fruit. So I made some fruit, I pureed some fruit and froze it. And what I did was his favorite, I did strawberry, but I also ran out of strawberries and I had some frozen berries in the freezer, which were raspberries and I think blackberries. And he took one look at that when I offered it to him, and he said, "Excuse me, but that's not strawberry."
That's funny. Yeah, my Labrador he's read that part of the lab manual that you just eat everything, and he'll like eat blackberries right off of the bushes. Unfortunately, he also likes eating grapes off of the vine, which grapes are toxic to dogs. So we've had to sort of protect the grape area from him. So part
Yeah.
of it,
So
right, is not just saying, oh, do whatever you want, because sometimes their judgment is not awesome. So it is our job, as the more well-researched people, to say, okay, here are the boundaries on, on behavior that's healthy for the dog, and boundaries on behavior that's not healthy for the human part of the community.
and that's it, isn't it? Because what we're talking about is being considerate to
Yes.
the personality, the individual likes, dislikes, the individual needs, whilst at the same time managing things to keep them safe. So with the best will in the world, Teddy does have to have his hair cut every 6 weeks. And it's never going to be his favorite thing. But we have worked out something that makes it tolerable for him.
Mm-hmm.
It has to happen. His hair gets matted if it doesn't. So that's what we're talking about. But the other thing that you said, which I thought was also very important, was you talked about the schedule, because that's a big stressor, isn't it? That our whole thing about we're trying to fit in 100 things into our schedule, and we expect them to not be dallying or be sniffing or whatever it is. We want them to be there, bang. And it's just like children with parents getting the children off to school in the mornings. And there's that chaos of the morning school run of making sure everybody's got their, their book bags and PE kits and everything else that they need. And they jump into the car and somebody's forgotten something. It's that, isn't it? And with dogs, it's just stressful.
It certainly can be, right? And sorry, I have two things to circle back on. First of all, what's a P kit?
Oh, PE.
Oh, PE, physical education. I was like, a P kit? Do they not have toilets in the schools anymore? Sorry. Anyway, so to your answer, yes. So giving one thing that I tell people is for their walk, for example, don't go as far as you possibly can in one direction so that you then have to rush the dog as far, quickly back to get to your next appointment or whatever. Going, just circling the block or going less distance allows you to then stop and allow the dog to sniff whenever they want to. Sometimes, of course, you're going to be in transport mode where you're like, okay, let's heel, and they walk with you. But other times most of the time, I want a dog who's just, decompressing and being there and having the humans also decompress. It's a really great part of the day when you can sort of decompress together. So yeah. So that space and time is good for us as well. Oh, and can I circle back to something else? About the hair. So grooming or vet care, any of those things we have to do to dogs, right? That's when giving cooperative care. I imagine you've probably done some stuff on that and on the show, but teaching dogs to chin target or opt in some way. And so my dogs, for example, when they chin target, it means I can mess with their ears or whatever else. And then if they move their chin away from the target, it means that it's not worth it to them. So they're chin targeting, they're getting their food every so often, and if it's not worth it, they'll move away and say, whoa, hang on, I need a little minute, and back to chin targeting, and then we're back to doing the thing. So
and the key to that is that they're not being rushed. And I think for me, one of the biggest lessons that Teddy taught me was stop rushing. Don't rush me. And that came right from when he was a puppy. And I realized that we don't have a drive to put our car on, so it could be parked around the corner. And if I'm going to be on time for something and he's with me, I need to leave the house 10 or 15 minutes earlier so that he can sniff and take his time, because for him, it's not about getting to the car. For him, it's the experience of what happens as we go to the car. So I learned that
Exactly.
on, and then later, I guess the big one is to do with grooming, in fact, that if I'm going to, and it became very clear that he was not going to have his hair washed and blow dried by the groomer using the hideous hair dryer that terrifies him. But he was happy for me to do it at home, as long as I give it a good hour. And the
Mhm.
reason is he needs a break here and there.
Right,
That's
right.
simple. And so when I learned to say to him, okay, we'll take a break. Are you ready to go again? And he goes, yep, okay, go again. And and that's
Nice. Yeah.
that's simple. But I know that in order to get him ready for the groomer, it means that on that morning, I'm just not going to get things done. That's that, because that is my job in the morning, is
Right.
getting to the groomer. And so this is how we come to accommodate each other's needs here. So
Mhm.
it's the key here, isn't it? It's that giving them time and space. So when it comes to things like aggression,
Mhm.
how does that tie into everything that we're talking about?
So it's essential, right? So the dogs basically resort to aggression, or they might resort to panic and fleeing the other direction when they don't have the coping strategies to deal with the situation. And so if we were farther away from a trigger, right? So trigger is the thing that they're freaking out about. So if they're farther away, they're able to sort of stay in their thinking mind and make better choices. If they have more time, they can be, they can also then make that choice, and making the choice rather than having it be made for you is far more educational. So people tend to constantly just get their dogs out of situations versus saying, you know what, he just needs a minute to see it, like to decide for himself that this is actually safe. And so, and most aggression comes from a lack of feeling safe in some way or other, that either that other being is going to come take your resources, or they're dangerous to your body. But it's all from some kind of lack of safety in my mind. Every so often there's a sort of idiopathic aggression, but that usually ends up being related to pain, which again circles back to lack of safety. Anyway, so in the technique that we use, we do these setups. So we arrange a scenario where the dog then does have space and time to sort of gradually work their way closer to something. And then on regular walks, then you might be doing as much as you can for that, like crossing the street or doing whatever else, giving treats. And then over time, the more setups you do, the less you have to avoid in real life, and the more it just becomes, like you have a dog that gets along.
To what extent, when we're using strategies to help them with their behavior, are we actually addressing the emotion that's driving the behavior?
I would say we're accessing, or we're working on that 100%. So it's what we do is we're sort of aiming to change the valence or valence, the like whether they like it or they don't. And so the kind of one standard thing with positive training is to associate with food, right? Punishment training is more like, you see the thing, if you do the wrong thing, I'll correct you. I don't do that ever. The food I do some. And what I mostly do is this chance for just giving the dog a chance to assess on their own if it's safe or not. Because when they have controllability and predictability, so they can control their own movement in space, because basically what we do is just follow them around unless they're going directly at the trigger, and in which case we do a slow stop. But when they have controllability and they can predict, okay, that dog is just kind of walking in a straight line or walking away from me or whatever else, then their defenses start to stand down, and pretty soon they kind of curiosity kicks in, and they're like, well, but maybe he wants to say hi to me. And so eventually, within one setup or two, they're friendly with that particular dog. or person or whatever the trigger is. And then that adds to the sort of database of so to the evidence, right, that people or dogs are safe, right, and fun, right. And so pretty soon the scale starts to tip in the direction of, well, I've seen, 100, or 20 dogs, and all of them became my friend. So maybe number 21 is also going to be my friend. So we can't erase that original learning. So the way the brain works is like that early learning is there. We can't erase it. And what we can do is sort of compile enough evidence that the brain starts to say, okay, actually, this is the truth compared to the other. So there's always some level of observation and making sure the dog does still feel safe in a given situation, but that's a skill that just develops naturally in the caregiver because of that.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because when you have a dog that is reacting aggressively, let's say to other dogs,
right, then you don't feel safe.
you don't feel safe, exactly. And so it's having to re-educate ourselves. Teddy is great with most dogs, as long as they're not much bigger than him, and especially if they're not Rottweilers. That has put us in some very difficult situations, which were very frightening for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that the most difficult aspect of this is managing my feelings to make sure that I'm not adding to his, if you see what I mean.
Right, absolutely, because there is co-regulation, right, between the two of you, because you're his attachment figure. He's connected to you. His heart rate is synced up to yours to some extent, and the breathing, all of that matters. One of the things I teach in my stop pulling class is the concept of a glimmer. So teaching yourself a verbal cue to calm down, which can then calm down the dog. But yeah, so the key is really, observing the situation and seeing, should we be in this at all? If there's an exit, great. And making sure the dog always feels like they have an exit from a situation. And it's that moment when they feel like they don't have an exit that aggression then starts to show up. And so being really mindful of that. And in the early stages of training, it's sort of like, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's not the end of the world. If there's a bark or, an episode, it's not great, but it doesn't set everything back. The key is really just to have an overwhelming number of good situations and do your best on the rest of it. So the setups really are what make the huge difference, rather than just kind of trying to do it on a walk, which is way harder.
It's interesting because, well, I guess the question I'm thinking of is that with many dogs, it's easy to track back and understand where a particular fear has come from. But sometimes, and I've seen this with Teddy's friends, where they're not comfortable with dogs that are bigger than them, for instance.
Right.
Nothing has happened. They've had very happy, well socialized puppyhoods and adolescence, and then suddenly there's this thing that I've seen with not all of them but many of them, where bigger dogs, they're a challenge. So where does that come from? Is this an instinct, or is there something that we're missing?
So the good question, or the main answer is I don't really know, right? We can't get into their heads but I can guess. So I see that all the time, right? That dogs have this sort of size limitation of like, okay, you guys are safe. I could battle you if I needed to. And then, okay, I would definitely lose if we were getting in a fight. So I think to some extent there's a lack of security, even with dogs kind of their own size, or there's been enough experience with dogs their own size that they're like, yep, I love all of those. And maybe just once during a growing pain, a big dog bumped into them, and we don't know if that was the time that they learned, watch out for the bigger dogs. They are more of a threat, and that's why the smaller dogs have more reactivity, because dogs just walk down the street and whack them with their tail, and they're like, it hurts, right? So it is more dangerous to be a small dog. So there's that. And I find that there's so much nuance in dog behavior that that dogs might actually be not quite as confident as people think, even in those other situations. And so that's usually, then we'll start back there in the situations where they are comfortable, and then really give the dog that sense of empowerment, and then start to weave it into the bigger dogs. I find once the person starts allowing the dog more freedom, rather than just like straight, walking down a sidewalk at another dog, then that actually ends up really ameliorating or reducing the aggression.
I was just thinking about your title as I was listening to you, and it's dog behavior adjustment. The word train isn't in there. And that
it is actually, it's behavior adjustment training, but it's actually maybe better as behavior adjustment therapy.
Yeah, it's actually, that's right. I'd forgotten about the training being in there. It's just the adjustment that really got me, because to me, it speaks of a process rather than just a goal. Is that what you were intending? Because I sense that there's something in that.
So that is a great way of thinking of it, and not quite. And I am now going to think of it that way. So I like the dial aspect, right? So for me, basically, so a lot of times or not a lot of times, all the times, behavior has a function, right? So if there's whatever the consequence that happens most of the time after is usually the function of that behavior. So they're barking for a reason. And so if we look at, okay, the reason is they want to increase distance between the dog and themselves, right? So then there's this chain of seeing the other dog doing the barking, and then getting that consequence of distance increase. And so instead of having that sequence, we're adjusting the sequence by replacing the one in the middle. So they see a dog, they turn their head and walk away, and there's a distance increase to the dog. So we're adjusting the behavior part in that A, B, C, the dog trainers would call antecedent behavior consequence chain. So the behavior part is being adjusted. But I do like that. We're not correcting, right? It's not like they're wrong. We are just shifting, and it's a process over time.
I like that. I like I like the idea that what we're saying is, you can increase your distance by doing something different. Because
there's another way.
It assumes that if he barks loudly enough, it's going to result in the other dog going, oh, better not mess with him. I'll increase my distance. I'll go away. And of course, he's very, very vocal. And what does happen periodically is that the other dog takes offense and says to him, no, you go away, you get out. And then
right. It's on. Right.
And the dogs who have tended to do that have been Rottweilers, in fact. Because
it is sort of the, live by the sword, die by the sword, right? So teaching them there's this whole other way that you could cope with this. And I teach nonviolent communication to humans, right? It's the same concept of like, just do something else. Like, I know you want this, but that's not the only way to get it. So,
well, happily, one of the things that he's decided is that allowing me to pick him up is a good way of increasing distance, because he feels comfortable, because he's higher, and so he doesn't feel so vulnerable. And he does, on the whole, just turn to me, or I say to him, "Come on," and he does immediately. He stands.
Yes, let's do that.
And then he basically says to me, "Now get me out of here." So
I would. Oh, go ahead. I would recommend if you, after you read the book, if you haven't, so do that, and then do some setups with dogs that are more of a neutral kind for him, but definitely do some setups with some nice Rottweilers. There are nice Rottweilers. So
We have done that. We have. We went through a process of desensitization, and that worked really nicely. Except then we went, I don't know, 8 months before we saw one, and
right.
and
Step
he
back, yeah.
was not back to square one, but not great. And then we had, I don't know, another period of I don't know how many months, and I tried to do some more of the same again, but our friendly Rottweilers were no longer around. So, so yes, it was beneficial. Unfortunately, it's not. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's not a breed we see very often.
Right.
So we didn't have the opportunity to reinforce and practice more. So that was unfortunate, but never mind. But yes,
Well, and
indeed.
return of fear is a well documented phenomenon, right? If you, after you get used to something, you're not afraid of it anymore. If there is a big time span, it can definitely come back, and like you said, not as bad, but it's still there. So
Yeah.
but once you have bat in your skill set, actually I find that that skill is still there, and so they can get used to things much more quickly.
It's good because I guess the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because this is such a big thing for people, isn't it? When their dog reacts to another dog or to people, or it's, and that's where I was talking about the lady earlier this week, where with her chihuahuas, how mortified she was at the behavior. There's embarrassment, there's fear of judgment, there's fear that our dogs are going to be hurt. There's so many emotions that run through us, and we need to have the confidence ourselves to be able to help our dogs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's funny, when you were describing that, I was thinking of a webinar that, so I have an online school and we have lots of classes. Marissa Martino taught one called Big Feelings, which is specifically all about that. So how dog trainers can help clients through this process of, it's really hard to have a dog with reactivity. It's isolating. It's scary. You're scared for your dog, or if it's, or that they might hurt another dog. Of course, the woman with the Chihuahua is more scared for her dog, right? Because once it aggresses, right, another dog may come back at it and say, "Oh, no, you don't," and so dangerous in that way. Or people worrying about legal issues, and so again, that space and time makes it so that we can also calm down. And giving people specific skills. So we have, another one called Urban Bat, and survival skills is a separate one, where people are learning what to do in an emergency situation. How do you get out of a spot where there's another dog that's too close or whatever else, and how do you avoid that in the first place? What are some ways to get your dogs to come back with you faster? But a lot of times people without that kind of training will resort to leash corrections or yelling at the dog, or because our own heart rates are fast, right? And we can't, our brains shut down, except for that sort of gut instinct of, okay, must get out of here and correct the dog. It's very primate of us to sort of punish.
Yeah. There's the loss of confidence in our dog as well.
Yes, and the breach of the connection.
Trust in our dog. So it's very easy, because if your dog is unpredictable and you are in a situation where you don't know how he or she is going to react, you may well panic yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have to even say, I have a blog post I wrote called "I Hate My Dog's Reactivity," and it started as "I hate my dog," and it was just like I just decided to soften it a little bit as my brain got back online. But there was this, my lab was new at the time, and he was just, there was an unpredictable, well, actually it was pretty predictable, but anyway, a situation that I did not predict, and it went poorly, and I was just mortified, especially as a dog trainer specializing in aggression, to have him barking his full head off and not taking treats. And anyway, and so I wrote a whole blog post about that, and kind of transitioning that into compassion, right? Because that's the key, is really recognizing that there's a being here who's suffering. And if we see it as like they're being a jerk or they're doing this on purpose, then we're going to be combative, versus like, this is an animal in our care and we have put them in a situation that they cannot handle. So
Yes, indeed. It's how would you say trust in our dog can be rebuilt? So I'm just thinking of a situation where a dog, it has become afraid of people and is small and cute, and everybody makes a beeline for her, and she has, I think, on a couple of occasions bitten somebody when they approached her. I would say rather rudely, actually. I would say they completely deserve that bite.
she wasn't
But
entirely wrong, right?
yeah, they were not listening. She was doing her very best to say to them, "Stay away from me," and they were going, "Oh, so cute," and
Oh, right.
yeah, and anyway, it's the carer now is afraid of her doing it again. So it's the trust she had in her has gone.
Mhm.
How would
Mhm.
we go about that? Because I'm sure there are many people in that situation. How do we go about
Absolutely.
building that trust?
So trust it builds over time. It's a two-way street, right? So the thing is that the long before the trust in the dog eroded, the dog's trust of the human was starting to erode, right? And so in a way, this fear that their dog will do it again is justified, right? Because their dog could do it again. So one way to build trust is to teach the human how to read body language. So to notice that the dog doesn't just bite out of the blue. There's all kinds of warnings and ways that the dog is communicating to us that they need our help. And so that's one thing. One way to build trust is to be more trustworthy, as well as knowing that this isn't unpredictable. So that's one big piece. Doing bat setups where seeing that dog then make friends with other people can build a lot of trust, both ways, right? And then I also do a lot of just relationship exercises where we do, calm, settle time, with the human and the dog together, doing a very like a calm, slow stroke if the dog's up for it. So like holding the hand somewhere on one part of the body, like the neck, and then the other hand doing a calm, like super slow, like it takes like 10 or 15 seconds to get down the dog's body. It can really soothe the nervous system. And then teaching those glimmers to, again, soothe the human's nervous system. So those things, muzzle training can be great. And that's just for when the human really messes up. So try not to need that, right? But you can condition the dog to be comfortable wearing one, so that if you were to make a poor judgment and the dog was not able to communicate, hey, I need space, then you can step in. So, and then we also have a class called Boundaries, or on boundaries, setting boundaries. And that's something that a lot of times what I see in dogs that bite is humans that have a harder time setting boundaries. So where was the human during this bite, right? So seeing that, okay, the dog is being put in a situation that's awkward, a lot of times that comes from the same, the human is also having trouble with setting boundaries on his or her own life, right? Other people sort of intruding, and the dog is an extension of them. So they're kind of just hoping the dog will suck it up and handle it like they do. So teaching the human to set better boundaries in their life in general, and when someone approaches, to give a hard no, of like, nope, stop there. Pick, here's a ball, or give the human something else to do that's very that isn't going to endanger the dog, or that will feel safe or happy for the dog.
It's very interesting because it is so true that it's Teddy knows there's one thing he's absolutely sure of, is that if he turns around and asks me to be picked up because he wants to get out, I will pick him up and I will get him out. He also knows that if I see the other dog is about to follow us, he'll growl, but he knows I'm going to shout at that owner and say,
"You got this."
call your dog back. He's seen me do it, and he's seen me be quite fierce if I need to. On the other hand, I am aware of people who will not do that for their dogs, and because they are too afraid themselves to say stop.
Mhm.
And I have on occasion, like I did used to be a teacher, so it comes quite naturally to me, but I've seen children come running at him, and he's not going to react badly to them. I know that, but I'm thinking of the dog who might react badly to them.
Exactly. That child is going to go do that to somebody else, and they're going to get bitten in the face.
I have actually stood in front of him and said very forcefully, stop there, nicely, but stop there. And they look at me and I say, now, when you approach a dog, you need to do it like this. And the parents are looking at me and I'm saying, Teddy's fine, but not every dog will be. And so then we turn it into a nice opportunity, because Teddy is actually great with children and he loves them. So then it comes into, but I don't see many people take such a proactive approach to protecting their dogs from unwanted attention. So it's what you said there really rang a bell, rang true, that we do need to be nicely stepping in and creating that boundary, because then yes, they are going to trust us.
And that's part of, what I mentioned before about relationship, of being a safe haven, that being around you is the safest thing, because you will help protect them should that be necessary. So that's I think that's interestingly, I was going to say that's one thing that is done, but I'm not correct. Actually, I was going to say it's one thing that's done well with a lot of, guys with punishment training tend to be sort of really clear about what's happening with their dog on the one hand. And then I'm just picturing this, like, lots and lots of times where it's like the dog is sitting there getting leash corrections if it does anything, and then people are allowed to just come up and, be in their face. And it just gives me shivers.
It's my mind, that's torture. That's torture.
It is. Exactly. It's so consent culture is huge for me in humans and in dogs. And that's, the dog has no way to say, I do not consent. And so giving them that option of being able to opt in and opt out is hugely empowering for the dogs. And it's going to make the dog way more trustworthy for, for your friend or for anyone else, and vice versa, that the human is there and has their back.
Actually,
so
that
it's good all around.
That's something else too, because that's another reason why I do stop children rushing up to him, is because I don't want to put him in that situation where he might not be in the mood, and I don't know. I know he's not going to hurt them. That I'm about 98% sure.
Right. He's a dog. You can't be 100%. Right.
But at the same time, his personal space deserves respect.
Right. And that's probably why he is better with them. Yeah. Absolutely. So kudos to you.
I won't have that. I won't have people just do that to him. So so I think we all need to be more confident, I guess, in speaking up where necessary for our dogs. As I say, nicely, friendly. Do it nicely. You when I'm asking,
right, absolutely. You don't have to be like, I hate you, get away from me.
Exactly.
Right? Just like, nope.
When people see me moving Teddy off the path somewhere else so that we can have space, I say to him, what's that over there? And I get him off.
Right.
And and they say to me, oh, my dog is fine. I say to them, mine isn't. I
Mine is fine because we're over here. Yeah.
exactly. They say, oh, mine's friendly. I say, mine isn't. Obviously not true. Mine is very friendly when he's not afraid. And your dog is going to frighten him. So I'm making sure that this is a pleasant experience for everybody concerned. But I don't say to them, well, your dog's fine. And it's not like that. I just say, mine isn't, with a big
Right.
smile.
And they can't deny that. Right. Exactly. And a lot of times, oh, go ahead.
And I was just saying, it never occurs to them that it's
Right.
not about the dog, it's about mine.
Right. They're worried, right, that you've done it because you're afraid of them, and maybe they've had a dog with reactivity in the past, or that their dog is big. A lot of times people who have those larger breeds, right, feel like people are biased against them by crossing the street, and it's actually our dogs are just going to freak out. So we're over there. We're not judging. We're just putting some safety. And so another thing that you can do in those scenarios, if the people are willing, is to then just go back and sort of stalk them from behind. So they pass by, right? You go to the side, they go by, and then you follow them if of course, or with their consent. Like, is it okay if we do some training behind you? We're not going to say hi. And then just kind of follow. And then that gives your dog another chance to see that dog kind of with more duration and more just the not sharp end of the dog, because the teeth are facing away, and so that can be easier as well.
That's a really lovely idea, actually. I like that very much. That's really good tip, and I'm sure that on our walks we tend to meet very nice people who would be very willing to allow that to happen. So thank you for that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I usually say, like, we're going to do some training. Can we use you as a distraction? And that way they sort of get the, like, okay, we're being useful, and, that my dog is safe, that sort of thing. Obviously your job to keep the dog safe, but
of course. So it always happens in these discussions, we end up talking about people, because ultimately it is not just about our dogs, it's about us. So I want to say thank you very much, Grisha, for your time today.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful, because I was just looking at the clock thinking I may have to set a boundary here soon. So thank you so much for having me on the show. And I appreciate the conversation.
If people wanted to, I'll be putting a link to your book in the description box, but if people wanted to find you, how do they do that?
My website is grishastewart.com. So just my name, and even just searching Grisha and dog trainer will get it. We have lots of classes, 100 classes over that, on all kinds of topics, from puppy raising to vet we bring in lots of experts from all over the world. So and I have a podcast coming soon. Can I say the name of it? It might be even out by the time this comes out. So it's called The Lesson is Love, and it comes out just 2 days after Valentine's Day. And it's not about romantic love, but it has dogs in it. We'll see.
I shall be following that and listening very carefully. The lesson is love. I love it.
The lesson is love. Yeah. I'll be interviewing all kinds of, like, not just dog people, people who have dogs, but musicians and artists and all kinds of people, tying in together this concept of co-creating community around the globe. So
beautiful. Yeah. Thank you very much for that as well.
Thank you. Bye.
And thank you all for watching. And until next time, goodbye.